students of class 10, I'm going to continue with the story All Summer in a Day. In my last class, I had discussed that this particular story takes place in planet Venus, where they had not seen sun for the last 7 years. So only once in 7 years the sun seemed to pop out, and that was the time when the children in the school were very excited. So that day also they had hoped that the sun would be out, and they were eagerly waiting for the sun to come out. But to their disappointment, the sun did not show its face. Instead, it started raining. So the children were very disappointed. So what happened was, there was a particular child called Margaret in that school, and she had come to planet Venus only 4 years back. And she had an idea as to what the sun looked like. So when she tried to tell the others that the sun is of this kind, of that kind, the children never believed her, and they always thought that she was not speaking the truth. But Margaret was speaking the truth because she remembered how the sun looked like. So in the class, they were even asked to write essays and poems on what the sun looked like and how the sun was, and Margaret had also written a few lines about the sun. And Margaret is described as an old photograph because she looked very pale and her color had been worn out, and she looked as if the rain had washed her all over. So this is what we discussed in the last class of the story All Summer in a Day. So today I shall continue with the story. "What are you looking at?" said William. Margaret said nothing. "Speak when you are spoken to." So then, as usual, William again started to trouble Margaret. So he asked her, "What are you looking at?" And Margaret, as usual, she did not speak. She did not reply. And then William got very angry and he said, "Speak when you are spoken to." He gave her a shove. Shove means a rough push. So he just pushed her. But she did not move. Rather, she let herself be moved only by him and nothing else. But even then, she did not move. Even after getting pushed, she did not move even an inch. They edged away from her. They would not look at her. So all the children, they just wanted to go away from Margaret. They did not look at her because she was a very different kind of a child. So nobody wanted to mix up with her. So they all edged away from her. She felt them go away, and this was because she would play no games with them in the echoing tunnels of the underground city. So she saw everybody going away from there, and the reason was she never used to play any games with the children in the echoing tunnel. If they tagged her and ran, she stood blinking after them and did not follow. So when they were playing the game of tag, when they tagged her and they ran away from there, she did not bother. She just kept on blinking and she did not run after them. So even Margaret could not adjust with the other children that were there in the planet Venus. So she was always alone. She always used to be all by herself, and she never mixed up and never played with any of the children who were present there. When the class sang songs about happiness and life and games, her lips barely moved. So even when other children sang songs about happiness and life and games, she never sang. Her lips barely moved. And then, of course, only when they sang about the sun and the summer did her lips move as she watched the drenched windows. So only when they sang about the sun and the summer, her lips moved little bit. So only when this situation was there, she sang. And then, of course, the biggest crime of all was that she had come here only 5 years ago from Earth. And she remembered the sun and the way the sun was and the sky when she was 4 in Ohio. So then, of course, the biggest crime of all was that she had come here only 5 years ago. And she remembered the sun, the way the sun was, the sky was, when she was 4 years old in Ohio. So that was the biggest crime, because she knew all about the sun, she knew what it looked like, she knew everything about the summer season. So that's why she had no problem. And that could be one of the reasons why she did not want to mix up with the children. Because these children had come long time back and she had just come 5 years ago. And she had a great problem adjusting with the environment of that particular planet. And they had been on Venus all their lives. And they had been only 2 years old when last the sun came out, and had long since forgotten the color and heat of it and the way it really was. And the other children, they had come to the planet Venus long time back, and they were only 2 years old when they had last seen the sun, and they had forgotten the color, the heat, the way the sun was. Everything they had forgotten. But Margaret remembered. But Margaret remembered what the sun was like. So that's why she knew everything. She remembered everything. But the other children had forgotten because they were very, very small at that time. And because at the age of 2, a person hardly remembers anything. So this is exactly what happened with the other children. They had forgotten everything, whereas Margaret remembered everything. It's like a penny, she said once, eyes closed. No, it's not, the children cried. It's like a fire, she said in the store. You are lying. You don't remember, cried the children. So when she said it's like penny, the children shouted at her. When she said it's like fire in the stove, again they shouted at her. And they even told her that she was lying. But actually she was not lying. But nobody believed her because the other children had forgotten how the sun looked like. And because of that fact, Margaret was in a big problem now because nobody believed her. Nobody believed what the sun was like when she told them. So that was not the mistake of even the children, because they were too tiny at that time to remember how the sun looked like. So this is the confrontation that went on among the children, and especially Margaret and the other children. Always there was a tussle and there was a quarrel, and they could never become one. They could never mingle with one another. But she remembered and stood quietly apart from all of them and watched the pattering windows. But she remembered and she stood quietly and she just watched the pattering windows. So she was tired of that rain. And once a month ago, she had refused to shower in the school shower rooms and clutched her hands to her ears and over her head, screaming the water mustn't touch her head. So what happened? A month ago, she had even refused to take shower in the school shower rooms and had clutched her hands, grasped it tightly over her ears, over her head, and she screamed that the water mustn't touch her head. So after that, dimly, she sensed it. She was different, and they knew her difference, and they kept away. So this way, dimly, she sensed that she was different from the other children, And the others also sensed it. So they always kept themselves away from Margaret. She realized, the other children also realized, and thought that it would be better if they kept themselves away from each other. So that is why she was always alone, aloof from the other children, always on her own, and she could never mix up and mingle with anybody. There was talk that her father and mother were taking her back to earth next year. It seemed vital to her that they do so, though it would mean the loss of thousands of dollars to her family. So there was even a talk that her father and mother would be taking her back to earth next year. And that seemed vital, important for her. Though it would mean loss of thousands of dollars, but that would be good for Margaret and very important for her upbringing. And so the children hated her for all these reasons of big and little consequence. So that's why these children hated her like anything. Because of this reason, because of that reason, they had various reasons to hate her. And also because of the fact that the parents of Margaret would be taking her away next year back to the earth. And because of that also they hated her. They hated her pale snow face, her wanting silence, her thinness, and her possible future. So they hated everything about her. Her pale face, her silence, her thinness, her possible future. Everything they hated about Margaret. This is what happened to poor Margaret. Get away! The boy gave her another push. What are you waiting for? Then for the first time, she turned and looked at him. And what she was waiting for her was in her eyes. So one of the boys shouted, "Get away! What are you waiting for?" First time she turned and looked at him. And it was evident in her eyes what she had been waiting for. "Well, don't wait around here," cried the boy savagely. "You won't see anything." Her lips moved. Then that boy shouted and said, "Don't wait here. You won't get to see anything today. So just get out from me." And her lips moved. "Nothing," he cried. "It was all a joke, wasn't it?" He turned to the other children. "Nothing's happening today, is it?" They all blinked at him and then, understanding, laughed and shook their heads. So everybody knew that even Margaret was waiting to see the sun that day. But they tried to just fool her, and they just tried to play a prank with her and tell her that nothing was going to happen that day. So they all blinked at each other and they all laughed and made fun of her and even asked her to go away from them. So this is how they did not like Margaret at all from the bottom of their heart. They hated her. And this is evident from their behavior. So they told her to go away, get away from them. And even told her that the sun is not going to come out that day. And that was what Margaret had been waiting for. "Nothing, nothing." "Oh, but," Margaret whispered, her eyes helpless. "But this is the day the scientists predict. They say they know the sun." But Margaret just spoke and said, "But today is the day that scientists had predicted that the sun would be out. And I'm sure the scientists will not be wrong." "All a joke," said the boy and seized her roughly. "Hey everyone, let's put her in a closet before the teacher comes." So now all of them started planning something vicious. So they just planned to keep her in a room, lock her up, so that she won't be able to see the sun. So before the teacher comes, let's lock her up in the closet. Let's take her. Closet means a cupboard, but at the same time it means a room also. So now they are planning to take her and lock her up in a room so that she won't be able to see the sun when everybody else would be enjoying in the sun. So a vicious and cruel idea. that the students of this class had. "No," said Margaret, falling back. They surged about her, caught her up, bore her, protesting, pleading, crying back into a tunnel, a room, a closet, where they slammed and locked the door. So they searched, they moved forward, caught her up, just carried her. And she was protesting and pleading and she was crying. And they took her into that tunnel, a room, a closet. They slammed and they locked the door from outside. So the mischief had been done. What they had planned for, that was successful. So they just took her and locked her up. They stood looking at the door and saw it tremble from her beating and throwing herself against it. So just saw the door and saw it tremble from the beating. She was beating the door like anything. And then throwing herself against it so that they would open the door and she would come on and she would also get to see the sun, which she had been waiting for so patiently. But they did not let that happen. They heard her muffled cries. She was just crying with less sound. Smiling, they turned and went out and back down the tunnel just as the teacher arrived. Then smiling, they just turned, went out, and they just back down the tunnel they went, and the teacher arrived at that time. So they didn't let Margaret see the sunlight. Instead, they locked her up in a room and they just tried their level best so as Margaret would not see the sun. So locked her up, her pleading, her crying, nothing worked in front of them. She was beating the door, she was just crying and asking them to let her out, but nobody listened to her. And this is how their plan of locking her up in a closet became successful. And just when they came back from the closet, the tunnel, then the teacher arrived. So what happens after the teacher arrives? I shall discuss that with you in the next class. So I think the explanation is clear to you, class 10. You just go through whatever has been taught till now, whatever has been covered till now, and I shall continue with the same lesson in my